Hi and welcome to Rockstars des Lebens, your podcast to more inner strength. Here you'll find engaging conversations, practical tips, and inspiring stories of people who deal with their life crisis like a rockstar. I'm Carolin Oder, always real, right in the middle and off the cuff. Let's face crisis together and thrive. Hello everyone and welcome to the 6th episode of Rockstars of Life, your podcast to more inner strength. First of all, let me say thank you that you take time again today to listen to this episode, and it's gonna be mind-blowing. I'm very, very sure about that. Because my guest today is Celia Chartres-Aris. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. You got it right.
And hi, Celia, first of all, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
I'm glad. You're sitting in the UK. Exactly where?
So I'm down in South Hampshire, which is kind of south coast area. Yeah, under London way.
Okay, nice. And I'm sitting here in Switzerland, near Zurich, between Zurich and Lucerne. And we just talk right this, and I was super excited to interview you for this podcast. Would you please give our listeners a quick introduction of yourself before I tell them why we know us?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening. So my name is Celia. I'm a government special advisor, so I work all around the world making sure that legislation, policy, laws, strategies are inclusive for disabled people or people with chronic and substantial health conditions. I've set up a couple of companies and a general advocate for disability and raising awareness, particularly around the reason why we know each other, which I'll let you say why.
Correctly. Thank you. Thank you, Celia. Yeah, Celia and I, we know us because Celia has the same rare genetic condition as my son has. And the Loeys-Dietz-Syndrome, actually, you also have type 2, right?
No, I've got type 5. My dad and my brother have type 2, but I'm sitting in my 5 bracket over here.
Okay. And you just heard it that in her family, the genetic condition runs from her father to her brother and to herself. We're going to learn more about it later. But Celia and I got few touch points over the Facebook self-aid group I joined 2017. You joined it, can you remember?
I'd say it was probably about 2-3 years ago, not as long.
Not as long, okay, cool. So I was lucky, I saw Celia and we commented back and forth, and I didn't expect it, but at my speech in London for the Marfan Foundation last September, Celia was also a speaker there and a participant, and I couldn't believe it that I met her in person. I said, I know your face, I remember you from Facebook. She said, yeah, that's true. And so I thought, after talking to her a little bit and knowing more about her struggles she is living with, and I thought she must come to this podcast because she is a true rock star of life. Because let me remember you that this the theme of this series from this podcast, the first series, is called There is Always a Best Case Scenario. So I believe that Celia found this sentence in her own life several times, seeing herself in situations which look really unsolvable, and found a way to deal with it, having good doctors, taking good care of herself. And Celia is living with a total organ failure. Mm-hmm. And she's going to tell us much more about it, but basically it means that the nutrition comes to her blood system over a pump, feeding pump, mm-hmm. and the liquid food basically is in a backpack on her back. And she's not allowed to drink and eat by mouth since 4 years now.
Yeah, this is I've just passed my 4-year anniversary. Yes. I don't know whether to celebrate or to cuss it, but 4-year anniversary has just been, it's a weird experience to not be able to eat or drink, and it's one I don't think I'll ever get used to. I don't think you ever it's such a core component of social and human interaction. It's something you never really get over, but you just learn to navigate a way through it.
We're gonna dive into that in detail because because I'm gonna share what our son asked you right when he saw you the first time. But additionally to that, Celia is she's like a celebrity. You just go ahead and Google her, go to LinkedIn. She's just talked last week for the United Nations representing the youth leaders of the UK. She was this episode is called the most influential disabled person in the UK, and that's her, and she's here. Yes, I am proud. Who knows how this is gonna be, but so this explains it. I mean, this rare disease, then the total organ failure, and her job and her engagement for disabled people all around the world, primarily in the UK, is just fantastic. So that's why official welcome to you to this podcast, Celia.
What an introduction. I love it.
Good. Before we go into the inner strength and the challenges you're facing, I would love to do a quick question round to get to know you on a different level a little bit better, okay? And it's like this pizza or pasta questions. You just decide within a few seconds what it is, okay? Beach vacation or city trip?
Beach.
Sneakers or high heels?
Sneakers. Definitely.
Are you an Apple or Android?
Apple, all the way.
All the way, yeah. Me too. Okay. Now let's go a bit more emotional questions. Luck through success or luck through relationship?
Luck through relationship.
Change the past or know your future? What would you prefer?
Change the past.
Self-love or unconditional love for others?
Unconditional love for others, 100%.
Okay. But you know how important self-love is?
I do. It's a
I do.
Both.
Throwing your emotions or keep them for yourself?
Depends on the situation.
Okay.
Overall, show your emotions.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Not to everyone, probably, maybe not on stage or so. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Celia. Okay. I know a lot about your present life. I do not know about your journey to diagnosis of Loeys-Dietz, your journey to your medical condition right now with the not being able to eat. Would you share it with us?
Of course. So I always knew when I was little that something wasn't right, and Loeys-Dietz wasn't found yet. It didn't exist yet in the ether. And I was always at the rheumatologist. I was always in A&E with broken bones or broken muscles. And so I was just kind of designated the sickly child. My dad had spent his entire life going through very similar things. He's always just been unwell. But he knew he had Marfan syndrome. And I was too little to be able to tell if I had Marfan syndrome. I wasn't old enough yet because all kids are bendy, all kids are accident prone. And then when I reached about 5 or 6 or maybe 7 mark, I went to be tested to see if I had Marfan syndrome. And they took one look at me and they were like, yes, there is Marfan syndrome there. Absolutely, definitely. And so I lived with that diagnosis and things started to make a little bit more sense, but still something just wasn't quite right. I would see my geneticists and my cardiology team, and they would always say, you know, you're one of the worst Marfan patients we have. Like, your symptoms are very extreme for Marfans. And so I used to get tested for a lot of other stuff, and it would always come back negative. But they were like, we'll just try. And then purely by accident, I got diagnosed with Loeys-Dietz syndrome. My father had a cardiac incident, but he was in London at the time, which is not where we lived.
Okay.
And he was taken to A&E. He said, I've got Marfan syndrome. They treated him. Thankfully, everything was okay. They calmed his heart down. It was just beating too fast. But what had happened there was a random nurse, had written on his notes in a piece of paper and pencil, Loeys-Dietz syndrome ? And
No
it
way.
had just been discovered.
It was like 2005 or
Yeah,
so.
yeah, literally just been discovered. And he never knew about it. It got lost in the ether. About a year later, those notes turned up at Southampton Hospital, and that piece of paper written Loeys-Dietz-Syndrome was there. And my geneticist went, "Oh, good point.
Good idea.
Good idea. Let's test our father." And it came back positive.
No
So
way.
thanks to that nurse, my father got diagnosed Loeys-Dietz, and obviously all his care then started to change. They then looked at me and went, "Okay, Marfan's girly over here. Clearly, I think she's probably inherited it." First time I got tested, it came back negative because they had tested me for type 2 and type 5 hadn't even been discovered yet.
Yes.
And they were absolutely baffled when it came back negative.
Yes.
They kept me in the Loeys-Dietz clinic because they knew something still wasn't working quite properly. Back 2 years later, I then got diagnosed with type 5, and they went, "Okay, everything makes sense now. We've got it all in paper. Let's keep going." And I was very lucky that they kept me in that care, and they didn't just sign me off and go, "No, she's not got it."
Yes.
It was about, I'd always struggled with my health when I was little, always ill, catching everything, always breaking my bones, but I wouldn't have put myself in a very severe category. When I was about 14, 15, things started to go quite drastically wrong, and that's the same thing that happened to my dad as well. I was sick a lot, kind of not being able to keep my food down. I caught meningitis, which had quite devastating effects on my spleen and things like that. But the pain, it felt like my body was on fire all the time, and they couldn't locate where this pain was coming from. And then when I was about 16, 17, the stomach aches I was getting was just unlike anything I'd ever felt before. And so I had my first feeding tube fitted to try and alleviate some of the pain while we waited to kind of figure out what was going on. And it went in my nose and down into my stomach.
Yes.
I then had something called a gastric emptying scan, which is effectively where you swallow little pills that have radioactive shapes in them, effectively. And then they scan you every 3 to 4 hours to
The way the pill goes.
to see how quickly the pills are moving through.
Okay.
I think it was about 28 hours later, and that was in the final scan, and the pills were still in my stomach, basically meaning my stomach wasn't emptying properly.
Yes.
I was then living with that feeding tube down into my jejunum, just past my stomach, for a couple of years. Slowly, however,
The feeding tube through the nose for a couple of years.
Yeah, through the nose, on and off for years. And then it was the beginning of COVID, and I rang my doctors and said something really isn't right. I'm being sick, and my feeding tube.
How old are you now?
So I'd just left university. I'd really struggled to complete university. I was tiny. For context, I'm 6'1", as most Loeys-Dietz people are, very, very thin and tall. And depending on whether you use kilograms or stone, I was about 37 kilograms at that point. So
and at age 22 or what?
Yeah. So I was tiny. And I got brought into the hospital, and what they discovered was that the paralysis had spread from my stomach through my intestinal system into complete failure. And what they'd also discovered was that because I couldn't peristalsis movement, my muscles just weren't working properly. All my other organs had then starting to stop. And so I was put on TPN, which is what I'm on now, which is a central line which goes into my heart, and I no longer use my intestinal system. I have a suprapubic catheter because my bladder muscle doesn't work anymore, which goes through your abdomen. So kind of urethra completely cut off now.
Is that the urine is collected in the bag on your stomach, on your belly? Yeah. Okay.
So I have a tube, so I don't go to the loo like anybody else anymore. And I know that I will eventually probably end up with a stoma when that last part of my intestines shuts down.
Meaning that the digestion of the nutrition you get, it is not a lot, I assume.
This is
right, but a part of your long intestine, or what is it, Dickdarm and Dünndarm, what's the English term, I don't know, but some part is working, so you have to go to the toilet for the
part is working, so the part kind of nearest to exit point, let's say it like that.
The enddarm, I guess. It's
working is probably the wrong word, but it's managing itself for now, but it is slowing down. And all my other organs, when we did a lot of investigation, everything's very small. It's like a child. So my kidneys are very small, my pancreas is very small, my spleen has, massively enlarged itself, my heart is very small, my lungs are very small, and everything is very compact within my body, and there's not much space for it to go. So slowly everything's just starting to shut down now. Yeah. And then kind of all the other Loeys-Dietz problems like scoliosis and rheumatoid arthritis and my heart not being able to regulate itself, mitral valve defect, all of the usuals sprinkled in there that people...
Is your aorta still holding up?
So aortic wise, I am very, very lucky.
Well, you have all the other shit. So
I do have all the other shit, but aortic wise, I am stable at the moment, which is the biggest blessing that I can offer.
It is, but as I say,
it only takes, I think that's the terrifying part, is even though you live with it being stable, it could not be stable in 3 days. It's not like it could, it's, for a lot of people it's progressive, but also for a lot of people it just comes out the blue as a dissection. And so you can't find peace in that stability, which is very hard. Yeah.
Exactly. We are talking about this, how we deal with this uncertainty on a daily basis, how we find our inner strength, because we never can be sure, as you said, on this stable situation. To understand the listeners who have no clue about what you just said, they can get a better clue by looking at the cover picture, or obviously I'm connecting, putting in the show notes some more links where they can see pictures of you and your décolleté, where you show your feeding tube. You were 22 when the two organs start, stomach and upper intestine started to fail. You are now 28 or 29? 28 years old. Okay, so 6 years. How was this for you? How did you process it? It's a progressing. It was progressing. You could never expect that you would end with this tube you have right now. But how did you deal with it at that time?
I've definitely dealt with it in different ways as it's happened. Like when it first started happening, I was at university and I was trying to get my law degree and I was pushing myself as hard as possible. And then I graduated and by the grace of God got through it somehow and did myself proud. And I was like, well, I'm not going to have wasted all that time. So I'm going to go straight into a legal job and work in the city and keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And then I ended up in bed for 1.5 years, not being able to leave my bed because I pushed so hard that my body literally collapsed. And I think very much when I was younger, I just wanted to pretend like it wasn't happening. And I'd get up and do my feeding tube, but then I was normal. And, if no one could see it, it wasn't there, it wasn't happening. And I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I was very naive in the way that I took care of myself. I'd say I didn't take care of myself at all. Even when I was younger, Mum would be like, stop running. I'd be like, I'm fine. Stop telling me what to do. This is my own future. It's my own destiny. As I got older, and it's still a balance I'm working on, and it's probably something I'll be working on for the rest of my life. I'm learning to kind of regulate myself a bit better and listen to my body. I think one of the biggest lessons I ever got taught was, you are your greatest asset. If you stop working, you can't do any of the things that you want to do. You can't have fun. You can't work. You can't do this. You can't do that. So even though it feels frustrating in the moment to say no to something or to stop and say, I need a little bit of time off and I want to go have fun. I want to enjoy something. It's most of the time the best thing to do. But mentally, speaking very candidly, I was diagnosed 4 years ago with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because, I've had my heart shocked while I've been awake and they shocked me by mistake. I've had tubes shoved down my throat, down my nose. I've had surgeries where I've had my neck cut open while I'm awake. It's been brutal. Yeah. And that
I know about PTSD, by own experience. But what is the C?
So CPTSD basically means that you're living through it. So you'll see
consciously.
yeah. So you'll see lots of times. So it stands for complex.
Complex. Okay.
Effectively, what it means is, so for example, we all know that a lot of people who come back from conflict are diagnosed with PTSD, and their relationship with their mental health is about learning that they're not in that situation anymore, and that they're safe, and that everything's going to be okay. When you have CPTSD, effectively, you're going to have to live through the thing that's causing you the trauma for the rest of your life in the foreseeable future. So I can't be treated by everybody telling me I'm safe and it's never going to happen again, and I have to learn to put those memories to the back of my mind, because I'm still living it, and I will always still have to live those traumas. Those tubes are still going to come. Those, procedures, those surgeries are still going to happen. So it's about trying to manage PTSD whilst also still having to do it. So effectively putting someone who has PTSD from conflict back in a war zone is effectively how I would try and describe it to people.
Yes, got it. Yeah. And do you get help regularly, on a regular basis, like a psychiatrist or?
I used to. The trouble was that nobody understands that mental health and physical health go very much hand in hand. And it's very difficult to just breathe and go for a walk and have a hot bath when I'm not allowed in steamy environments, and I'm not allowed to physically exert myself, and I'm supposed to be resting 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, I never found anyone that really, really understood the physical things that came with my mental health and how intertwined those relationships can be. But I'm still looking and still hopeful. But I feel I'm much more managed than I used to. I used to have really bad kind of triggered episodes with behavior that just wasn't me, and a lot of anger and a lot of, things that just were not who I was. Like I'd go food shopping and things like that, and I can't eat. Why am I going food shopping? Yeah. It was just this sheer panic that would take over my body. Yeah. But it happens less now. But every time I end up back in that hospital, every time I have to have my tube changed, it's a procedure while you're awake, and they're cutting your neck and your chest open. Like you can feel it because you have to cough. That's very triggering for me. But I have the tools. I just need to learn over the next couple of years to make sure I'm embedding them properly. Yeah.
And actually, once you think you would embed them, then you just drop back to your old way of dealing with it, which is very human.
Exactly.
And is like the daily struggle, being right still in the middle of it. And this is what we both have in common, actually, that we cannot talk about the crisis we had and how we came out of it and share our experience from the past. We share our experience not knowing, as you just said earlier, in 3 days everything might be different. Yeah. And this is an asset, actually. I mean, we are like so much in it that we understand everyone who is in a crisis. But on the other hand, obviously, it's pretty tough. For me, the work right now, the podcast, the book, my speeches, they are like, for me, my therapy, my traumatic therapy, my trauma therapy, say it like this. How I deal with the fear of loss of my son. And how is your work for you?
I think, you've just said it so beautifully. It's the way I describe it is taking back the power of when I talk about it and I use it to fuel. Like, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for my experiences and the things that I've been through and who I am. I wouldn't have been doing any of this. And I love what I do so much. So I'm so grateful. In a weird way, I'm so grateful that I do have Loeys-Dietz and I have had these experiences. But talking about it and meeting other people, that feeling of loneliness can really hurt. And it's not like a sadness. It's a right in the pit of your stomach. Constant worry about I worry about my dad. He's 60 something, and every day I think about it and it terrifies me. And it's about taking back control of the word and the feeling. And if I talk about it and I show what's possible and I put happiness on it and I put power on it, it then doesn't have as much power over me. And that's what I think is so important, but also having something that fits in that rare category, you know, add illness and then add in the fact that you don't know anyone with it, and you've just got a whole nother minefield that people can't understand and never will understand. And it's solidarity, I think, is really important.
We're gonna hear more about what you do with your own company right now and what you do on the legislation level for the country, UK. Before we go over to this side, once you are really down, like you don't have to answer it, but once you are in a really dark place, you know, something bad happened, or you're just mentally down, everything stayed the same physically, but you're just so fed up with all this shit. How do you get out of it? What do you do for yourself? Is there someone who helps you? What did you discover over the last years you might share with us, and others may try it as well?
I think, and it's such a powerful question that I think people don't ask enough. So I'm really grateful that you asked it. I think one of my greatest sources of comfort is my family. And again, I'm so grateful that my dad has it too, because, you know, we laugh and we joke. We very rarely talk about things in a serious way. We always joke about it. Like, we have a joke about LDS arms. Like, when my mum can't reach something, she shouts, "LDS arms!" We come and grab it off a shelf.
Yeah.
But we laugh and we joke about it, because if everything is so serious all the time and everything is so doom and gloom, that you have to find humour in the darkest of places. And having that support network around me is so invaluable. But I also think the other thing that's so important to me about getting myself out of those really dark places is realizing that just because I can't do everything that everyone else can do, it doesn't mean I can't do anything. And it's about, over the last couple of years, finding hobbies, finding things that I enjoy that may be different from everyone else. Or some people might find it childish or babyish, or they might find it like old lady-ish. I don't mind. It brings me joy and it brings me happiness. Like like a real old lady, I love doing my doll's house, and, you know, I love collecting little bits for it, and I love doing anything arty, anything crafty. I can sit for hours and do it. You know, other people might find that boring and spend Friday night going to a club. I can't do that. But I have found things that do make me happy, and but allowing people around you to kind of encourage you to do them, because sometimes you feel so hopeless in those darkest of moments, you just want to put the duvet over your head and just cry. And it's that kind of having those cheerleaders around you saying, "Come on, you can do this, get up, let's go and do some painting, let's go and do some pottery painting, let's go and do something, let's just do something."
Yes.
And them knowing what those somethings are that make you happy. And that's really important.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for sharing that. If I ask that every guest, obviously, how they deal with dark places, or how they access their inner strength, because obviously being on that podcast, you definitely have a lot of inner strength, proving it on several levels. So, but I compare it to my like this principle, or the now so principle, and you just mentioned the N, the network, how important it is to have this social and whatever strengthening network around you who reaches out for you, who loves with you. You know, no, this is another issue, but to know that you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Right? You can reach out for help, ask for help. There are people around us who really want to help too. And the second, what you said, focusing on what I can instead of crying about what I can't. This sounds easy.
But it's not.
It's not.
It's not. And like,
it is not.
To that point as well, around network, something I think as a family we've learned over the years is about toxic positivity. It does not make me feel better when someone says everything's going to be fine, you know, everything always works out, because unfortunately, going by our luck, it never does. But learning that toxic positivity and people saying one day there'll be a cure, one day there'll be this, one day there'll be that, is not helpful. I want somebody who's going to sit there and say it's shit with me. I don't want to feel like I'm crying to someone who's thinking, you know, one day there'll be a cure. Why is she being so? Cry with me, be angry with me, scream at the world with me, because that's the like, it's so relieving and so I suppose grounding when someone screams with you. And one of my friends who I love dearly, he lives in Belfast, you know, he always says, literally scream. He rings me for a scream, and we just scream at each other down the phone and just go 3, 2, 1, scream.
Wow, really? That's fantastic.
Get it out. Like, you are allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to feel frustrated. You're allowed to be so pissed off and to say, why me? Why is it always me? Because it feels like that's so much. You just think, why us? Why is it always us?
Yeah.
You look around you and no one else has to deal with the things that you have to deal with. Allow yourself to say those things. You're not a bad person. You're not an ungrateful person.
Yeah.
Let it out. Say it. Allow yourself to feel the way you want to feel. There's so much power in that. Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true what you say. That's the E. The emotions. Show your emotions and don't be ashamed of them. And emotions is not, I'm so hopeful and everything's gonna be all right. It really sucks. And if like people from the outside wanna help us with it, it's like just sitting, like you say, sitting with us, crying with us, not offering any solution.
Yeah.
We find all our solutions ourselves.
Exactly.
Yes, we are superstars. We can do it. You see, I mean, we're still here. So, but just allowing the emotions even provoke crying, screaming like your friend does. It's fantastic. And it's so healing. And then again, focusing on the can do.
Exactly.
Okay, this is shitty now, but what do you can do? So what would you love to do? Well, do you want to try this? Yeah, why not? And it's yeah. And I mean the G, like the solution orientation, you have it inherited anyway. You know, you had so many problems coming up in your life. To believe that there's always a best case scenario. This is like in you, obviously, and luckily in your doctors too. I'm really amazed and in awe what, you know, how they keep you alive. And how medicine keeps you alive.
My dad's 65 in a couple of months, and he's got Loeys-Dietz, and he's still here. You know, he's not in great shape, but he's still here, and
that's so hopeful. That's so great to us parents with younger kids, and it was therefore to wrap this up. It was therefore cool that our son did have the chance to meet you in London. And we explained him what you're going on, and obviously he saw your backpack and the tube and didn't know what it is. And we are very open with him since we got the diagnosis, or since he's born. So we didn't want to scare him or whatever, but just explained him about your total organ failure. And he is a foodie. Yeah. So he looked at you.
Was I?
So were you?
I was an absolute foodie, yeah.
Yeah. And he looked at you and he said, "Aren't you hungry?" And you said, "I am very hungry." Yeah. And he was like totally amazed by your power and what's all possible and what people really can do if your circumstances give you no other choice. Yeah. It's really fantastic. To understand your life a bit better, I think walk us quickly through the biggest challenges in society or with your feeding tube, not in general for disabled, but for you personally. What's the biggest struggle? What does nerve you and comes up anytime again? By traveling or by, I don't know, and having friends over or whatever.
Lack of understanding and things that are uncomfortable. Like I've got lots of symptoms, but as you said, like my biggest thing is my feeding tube, and it dominates every single day of my life. I get up at 7 a.m, I unplug it, and I plug it in again at 3:30. And I do that every single day. So I have no flexibility and no spontaneity to my life whatsoever. But the biggest thing I struggle with is when people feel uncomfortable, I can feel your uncomfortableness, and people then shy away from the conversation, so they don't want to learn. I go through an airport, I get strip searched because it's something different. Even though I've got all my paperwork, they strip search me because they don't understand. I go to a restaurant. "Sorry, madam, it's for paying customers only." I know, I just want to sit with my friends and they're eating, so is it okay if I eat? And I have to order food or a drink so that they let me stay with my friends. I go out in the street, everybody stares at me. everybody stares at me. I try to go into a venue that has security. Excuse me, madam, what's on your back? Totally understand. Here are my papers, explaining what it is. No, I'm sorry, you can't come in. There's a fluid allowance. Feeling stared at, feeling unwanted, and feeling like I'm taking up space where I'm not wanted is the biggest thing that I would change. And my life would be so much easier. You know, I could sit here and say, I wish I didn't have it. That's never going to happen. Like, it's here to stay and whatever. It is what it is. But constantly feeling stared at and embarrassed is something I still struggle with every single time I leave my house. I
was thinking you have to repeat yourself so often. And how do you where do you get the patience? Don't you get snappy and bitchy? Yeah, I would. It
really depends on the situation. Like, if you're the third person asking me that evening, my response is going to be short and snappy. If you're the first person, but I fundamentally believe it's all about intention. It's with what intention are you asking me these questions? It's natural human instinct to look twice or stare at something you're not usually used to seeing. So I don't mind when people go, oh, you know, double take. So when you hold that stare a little bit too long, that now you're staring me down, that I feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But I can tell the intention in which you're asking me these questions. Are you asking with me because you're nosy and you want to embarrass me, or you're just being a dick, to put it mildly? Or are you asking me because you genuinely want to learn so that the person that comes next after me is in a much better position than we're currently in having this conversation? 98% of the time, it's the first one. And that I find incredibly frustrating. So most of the time, I probably am quite short and snappy and bitchy. But I wouldn't be if I could feel that your intention was a positive one, but so rarely it is. And I've genuinely been out in public and had people pull on my tube. Like, my tube is sewn into my heart. It's sewn into my aorta and my jugular. And people will pull on it and say, what's this? What's this? I just think, are you?
Oh my goodness.
Joking me. And I've had, you know, I've been in through airport security and they're like, excuse me, madam, we've just got to swab your bag. I'm like, totally fine, totally understand it. And then they go to walk away and I'm like, can you not see that I'm attached to this? And I was like, oh, I need to come with you. And they're like, no, sorry, you can't. And I'm like, can you not see? The mind boggles.
Yeah. How when did you start to go into the public, like with your décolleté open? Because I know that in earlier days you tried to hide it or cover it up.
Still now, you know, over 4 years later, I pick my moments where I'm comfortable. If I'm going into a crowded place, the tube is in my pocket, is shoved down as far as it will go, and I'm turtlenecked up to the top. It also depends on the weather. England's very rainy and horrible. I still get a lot of embarrassment from it because it's people staring. I'm not embarrassed by it. Like, at home, I'm not embarrassed. But I also have a catheter on my leg as well. And that I hide, not because I am embarrassed by it because it's a bag of pee, but also because I know people don't want to look at a bag of pee. So that's more for other people of just like, I recognize that you don't want to look at this while you're eating your lunch on the beach, so I'll hide it. But with the tube on my chest, you know, there's nothing icky about it. There's nothing, you know, you can't see anything coming in or out. But it's still something I definitely will probably never fully conquer. Like, if I'm meeting a group of people I've never met before, I will hide it. Hide it. Yeah.
Then I even find it more amazing that you did this photo shoot showing your tube, and I think it's amazing how you do it and how you deal with it.
Yeah, and like, I purposely choose like that cover image or like a headshot image. I purposely choose one where the tube can be seen, because I know then, like, this is how kind of far in advance I think about my level of embarrassment. Is I know when I meet someone in person, they're already aware because they've seen it. And for me, that's almost like cutting through a level of conversation that I have to have. You know, is it everyone picks their profile pictures as their best picture of themselves? Is it a picture I love of myself? Absolutely not. But it's one that serves a purpose.
Yes.
Which is it's sad, but also, yeah.
Totally understandable. Let's move to the photo shoot you just did lately, where you did not show much of your tube, but your backpack, I saw, at least for your company, Disabled by Society, it's called. and you have it together with your husband. Is that right?
No, so
Your friend. Everyone thinks, oh my God.
Everyone thinks we're married. No, he's called Jamie Shields. He is registered blind, ADHD, and based in Belfast. But we are best friends.
Okay.
And kind of genuinely, everyone thinks we're married all the time. My husband, he's very entertaining. It's very entertaining when people think we're married. But we're an organisation so this is my 4th company that I founded now, centred around disability. And our aim in life and across the world, so we work globally, is to dismantle the barriers of ableism. And ableism, for anybody that doesn't know what that is exactly how we use the word sexism, racism, transphobia, homophobia, describes all forms of discrimination that disabled people, neurodivergent people, people with chronic illnesses face in their life across every aspect of society.
Oh, thank you so much. This question was on my agenda. Obviously, I translated it. You hear it in the media, ableism, more in the English speaking. I don't even know a German word for that. I will look it up. And I knew what it meant, but I couldn't remember it. Now you explain me. It's like sexism, alcoholism. It's like discrimination of your circumstances you cannot change.
Exactly. And
right?
people's minds automatically go to, not having a lift or not having a ramp. It's so much more than that. It's accessibility. It's not being able to access mental health support as someone with a chronic illness. It's the way you're treated by your doctors. It's the way you're treated by your school. It's not just these kind of stereotypical images that we have of disability. It's so far beyond that and applies to in every aspect of our lives that we're trying to focus on.
That's cool. So you're offering like education, training, consulting for companies who say that they are open to anyone and inclusive. And then you say, well, if you are inclusive, why isn't your job
Precisely. And then we fix it. That's the key thing, is we identify and then we fix. And we also do a lot of policy work as well. So looking at legislation, and then kind of on the side of Disabled by Society, I do my special advisory work around the world.
Special advisory work around the world. It's fantastic. You're like taking your own situation and you level it up that all those behind you will have it easier. It's fantastic. Celia, whatever you leave behind, such big footprints in the world. And I'm proud I know you.
Thank you.
Yes. Fantastic. Cool. Be a little bit more precise and educational for those of us not being disabled ourselves. What do you recommend? Because I saw you have, like, on your website and on your social media accounts, you share these graphics. You do. It's really fantastic. How you explain others how to host a Christmas dinner or a New Year's Eve party, including disabled friends. And not all friends know how to do it. And then you are just not invited anymore because you can't eat and drink. Why should I? I don't want to embarrass you sitting on my dinner table and not eating. But that's the wrong way to deal with it, right?
100%.
What would you recommend us?
The way I always approach it is think about what you would say to someone that doesn't live with a chronic illness. So, for example, if somebody says to you, I've got a really bad tummy, would you then follow that up with, so tell me about your bowel habits. Tell me how you go to the bathroom. Tell me how that all works for you if you've got a gluten intolerance. You wouldn't. You just go, they've got a gluten intolerance. Okay, I can figure the rest out in my mind for free. I don't need to ask those invasive questions. If one of your friends is a vegan or has a dairy allergy, you just ask them before they come to dinner and say, is this okay? This is what I'm making. Is there anything I should avoid? Someone that might be pregnant, what are you eating? What's setting you off into feeling really unwell? I am normal. My normal is just different. The one thing all of us in the world have in common is the fact that we're all different. You don't need to treat me with kid gloves and a silver spoon. I don't want that. I am the same as everybody else. Just my normal's just a little bit different. So just stop and think to yourself, how would I ask this to someone that didn't have her condition or didn't live like the way she did? what questions would be okay and not okay to ask. You know, the questions that any disabled person gets asked is around bowel habits, sex, and work. Those are the three things that people think about when they think about someone with a chronic health condition, and they're so intrigued and they're so nosy. I'm like everybody else, just a little bit different, but people put up this guard of, oh, she's over there, she's separate, she's special, so approach it differently. And I don't want to be treated like that. So that is my primary advice for anybody, whether feeding tube or not. Anybody that has any kind of relationship or interaction with someone that deals with something that maybe is a little bit out of the ordinary, is just stop and think to yourself, would I like to be asked that question? And that's the best way forward always. And then we can be really sure that, you know, just use what you've learned, what's appropriate. Common sense.
I mean, we're not talking about super close friends, you know. We can talk about everything, but that's different. If I have a guest over, if it's a student colleague I meet, or a work colleague, or a neighbor, you would not ask if you know, if sex life is going well, if you're sitting in a wheelchair, do you take Viagra, or what you do. You do not ask that, right? That's cool, yeah. And I also, you recommended that probably people, you know, they have a bowel issue, or like the catheter or whatever, that you place them at the end of the table or whatever, near to the bathroom. Obviously, you say if you have stairs to get up to your home when there is a wheelchair driver coming. Yeah, I think it sounds pretty self-understanding for a lot of people might be listening here, but really hands-on, be really true to yourself. It's not. And especially, like, if I would think Celia would come over to our house, I would feel honored, but I wouldn't make my mind up how she would feel inclusive,
like
right?
People that I've known for years still offer me a cup of tea, and I'm like, no. And they go, yeah, but I'm just being polite. I'm like, you don't. One of the most powerful things people can do for me is when they lay me a place like everybody else at the table. You know, there's just no cutlery, but there's placemats still out, and the napkin's still out, and the little name tag's still there. It means more than words can say to feel part of it, that I'm not just sat on the end of the table on my own, you know, looking at everybody else. One of my best friends, I've known her since I was 3 years old. Whenever we go to, she's a real foodie and a real winey. She loves wine, she loves food. We have this ongoing joke that whenever we go out as a four, like with my husband and her husband, we always ask for like the kids' colouring pencils and like and we all sit there before the meal and we do like fun little drawing, like draw each other and then play hangman and like play cross. And just, it means so much to me when she does that, because it's not like a big thing. It's not a big Ferrari, but it's like a fun thing that we all do together now. And I'm part of the meal now, and I'm not just there kind of sitting waiting for everyone to finish. Because we find a way to make it fun for everyone. That's real fun.
And that's inclusion. Right? And if I would have you over for dinner, I would still make my mind up and think what she could, what she can't, and how you would feel. But inclusion then means I just treat her as she could eat. Yeah. You know, we just don't put something on her plate and don't pour her water. But
people avoid eating around me, and I'm like, you can eat around me. Like, you're making it worse by not eating, because I can see that you're hungry and I can see that you're thirsty, and now you're making it a bigger thing, and now I feel even more obvious than I already did. Like, I love a dinner party. I love chatting with my friends. I love, you know, going out and they're drinking, but I'm not, and that's okay. Designated driver always. It's okay. My fun. I can still have fun and I can still enjoy my life, even though society says that I shouldn't, and that my life is horrible, my life is awful, my life is a bit shitty. I wish there were things I can change, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy, and it doesn't mean I can't have fun where I can.
Absolute. Ah, wonderful, Celia. The last 45 about minutes, it got even more clear to me why you are a guest here in Rockstars of Life, and I'm really moved by you, and you can see it. I'm like not. I'm your biggest fan, and I just want us to stay in touch and support each other. And you are amazing, and I think you helped a lot of listeners to understand what inclusion really means and how even when the life is so hard that we all cannot imagine how you deal with it, there are ways, and there's always a best case scenario. And I'm glad you're around, and our son also would love to stay in touch with you, so that's fantastic. And Steffen and I hold on to your dad. If our son turns 65, we are we are gone by then, probably. But this would be the biggest gift for us. Yeah.
I think having
thank
something that's rare, you get scared by the statistics. But what I always try and remind myself is that there's not enough data to make those statistics, and everybody's story is different. And finding so often everything is just about the negative, about loss and about grief. And actually there's so many of us that are just finding our way through, and finding your tribe of happiness, I think, is so important. We'll always be here, always.
Fantastic. Very good closing sentence. Thank you so much for your time, Celia. And thank you for listening to all of you. And I hope you gonna be a fan like me for Celia Chartres-Aris. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.